Sleepers, Chapter 37, Flight. Initiating Jane into my circle of trust was exciting, but I was more eager to return to sleep. She had devoured so much time asking questions and studying my childhood to understand how I got to this point. Now that she knew my secret, I could push back on the time commitment and really try to perfect my lucidity. The Cumulus Drug was starting to erode the ethereal boundaries between sleep and day which protect the mind. Rational control loomed as my next conquest. I raced for bed when she left for the night, ready to enter the brave new world. I don't know if I dreamed many dreams or only one prolonged chimeric adventure that evening. The world in my mind resembled semi-logic, as if viewed through a distorted mirror. Images, connections, and interactions seemed right and plausible. These events had always made convincing sense to my dreaming mind, never raising enough warning flags to elicit rejection. Yet now my conscious state encroached on the subconscious, and could not be deceived. I sensed the hijack of reality and consciously awoke to the dream. Though lucid, I did not have perfect memory or perfect control. There is a balance between mental states that must be preserved or forced into submission. I was prepared to do neither. The world was strange. The memory of my living hours was unexplainably distant, but I knew I was in a dream, and by knowing I could force otherwise impossible outcomes. Quickly forgetting the plan to self-generate a sword or any weapon per my training, I turned to sensuality. It is the natural reaction of a man with lucid tendencies. The thought of Jane, unspoiled, aggressive, and whole, came to mind. I wanted her. I wanted this moment in all its lustful glory, so I exerted my power to make her appear. But Jane wouldn't manifest herself to me. I could not recall her image, nor could I create a plausible look-alike that my rational self could accept. Writer's block, or at least its lucid dreaming equivalent, had struck me dumb. I realized I was limited and would need practice. Failing to project my carnal desire, I pursued the next logical lucid manifestation: flight. If I couldn't create weapons or people, I would force unnatural control against the face of basic physics. Looking down at my feet, I jumped, believing I would disconnect in a graceful act of flight. My feet stayed fixed to the ground, unmoved by my empty belief. My subconscious imposed understood scientific principles to restrict my conscious intrusion on its realm. Relentless, I tried again with greater exertion. At last I convinced my mind that if I could expel anti-gravity from every muscle, as if energy exuded from my legs and arms, I might push my body away from the Earth's pull. I had to apply science, albeit science fiction, to disobey science. It worked. I began to fly. But my awkwardness was like the first steps of a toddler. If I lost focus, my anti-gravity deactivated, and I began to fall. But I held on, battling lethargy with self-control. The unstable flight was glorious. My confidence blossomed. I was dreaming in full, lucid resplendence, finally experiencing the famous flying dream. I awoke remembering the flight. Lucidity truly worked. Cumulus worked. I was on the path, and I could see the clouds. Jane's involvement could not have come any later. Action was needed. The Matson continuity plan allowed for 5 to 8 years in various roles across R&D before graduating to business management and corporate planning. Ray had managed to fill much the same role for 3 years due to his phenomenal progress in artificial sleep substitution. I will really miss this job, John. I am really liking our research, the team, the science, all of it. He sat casually on the edge of my desk, tossing a ball in his hand. Ever since taking my team over, he'd found it all too easy to pester me at work. That sounds like farewell talk. What's going on? We needed time. I needed time. The plan needed time. He had served as my manager for just 1 year, but was feeling the pull of corporate planning. Why did he sound like this was the end? I was still a long way off from taking my prototype and delivering it to the world. The president called me up to discuss the family business. We won't be here forever. He gives it maybe a year or 2 before they move me up. And not just me. There's a strategy for you too. The family takes care of everything. The ball went up and down 2 more times. I believe that, but we have more time, I contradicted. Why the rush? We have time, yes, but our parents don't. The continuity plan allows for a short-term caretaker, but the board and the family prefer the Matsons run it, in which case we need more experience. I think I can push off for 2 years, but after that, our time is up. R&D will be a place to visit, not our home. The succession plan moves forward. I leaned over and grabbed the ball from my distracted manager as it came down again. I like it here. We have more to do. And lots to learn before we lead the Fortune 500 company. You always knew what you wanted, and this was it, he said, gesturing to the R&D department. Perhaps the codified plan will be the hardest on you. I could never decide on a single interest, meaning this Desmond Matson track is perfect. Change is encoded into my grandfather's plan, and my course, which I'm starting to like more and more, is determined. Ray was growing up. Since his visit to the Senate Sleep Committee, he no longer behaved as the wanderlust suck-up I conjured in my mind. He now had purpose and energy. Our division had performed well under his leadership. But the real change, the real marker of a new Ray, was in the dearth of women. He hadn't dated again since splitting with Gabby, and never mentioned any hopefuls over lunch. His work was at last his life and only purpose. I could finally eat lunch in peace, but I missed the comic relief. I tried my last defense to test this matured nemesis. Projecting a sly look to indicate bantering, I joked, "You were never happy with fixed destinies. Has the company brainwashing finally worked?" He smirked, searching for something to do with his hands. "No brainwashing necessary. Yes, my father's confidence is nice, but not necessary. I finally found what I like, and I have a purpose." He paused, cocked his head, and added, "Guess I'm acting more like you, John. You always act with a purpose. Not sure what that purpose is, but it's there. I can see it." "Still figuring it out myself, Ray," I replied tersely before quickly ushering him out. His contemplation was dangerously accurate. A distracted Ray had no time to think, and no time to decipher me. There was always another woman, another breakup, another life decision with no deciding power. But a thinking Ray came too close to understanding. Not my actual purpose, but at least discovering there is a mystery worth understanding. Secrecy is easier with the self-consumed. Chapter 38. Persuasion. I awoke effortlessly from my lucid sleep state. Empowered now by months of concentrated drug treatments, I transitioned freely from the subconscious theater to the less exotic awakened state, fast approaching the 5C status. With the memory of Karl's tutoring, I rehearsed his lessons and increased my skill. I had been carelessly contemplating in dreamland the future offered by my lucid drug to generations imprisoned by sleep servitude. Such wanderings of the mind triggered deeper fears. Would I be a savior or a pariah for instigating the destruction of mankind's greatest achievement in peaceful coexistence? Would my family name replace Ray's in the echelons of esteem when the slave system failed? Or would those supposedly empowered by the sleep system on both sides ostracize, or worse, terminate me for changing the world order? What punishment awaited the lone warrior who even tried to change the world? None of these fantasies would matter if Ray translated my purpose behind the downloaded vision. Cumulus provided me full access conscious reign in the sleep state, but the possibility of unwanted transmission loomed. The depth of the name I picked in youth continued to astound me. Cumulus clouds provided shade from the sun, yet under the right conditions, they turned to storm clouds. What storms would Cumulus bring to this generation, or to me? The more lucid the dream, the cleaner the reality, the clearer the transmission between sleeper and client. My daydreams could be dangerously potent enemies. Without fragmented elements infused by the subconscious, the entire message might unfold for Ray. Certainly elements of this particular daydream excursion would leave imprints on Ray's mind, but today I felt safe. Perfectly clear interpretation of dreams requires either the sleeper's tenacious repetition or one single, very vibrant lucid dream. Karl possessed such power in a single transmission. That was how I read his mind after one shared moment. He had mastered lucidity. He had learned which details to leave for the client and not sacrifice the vibrancy. I was a poor pupil, but Cumulus eventually purchased me an advanced degree. I knew I was safe with this dream. My rhetorical questions and exploration of future outcomes would obfuscate the dream, reducing hope for interpretation. Distractions and discontinuity would garble the message. Haze-free, lucid content would still transmit. Ray would wake wondering if he had missed the most important thing in his sleep, but the question would vanish, dismissed by the challenge to remember dreams. Within 10 minutes, maybe an hour, he would forget everything, and I would be safe. But I would need to be more vigilant if my ultimate plan were to succeed. I contemplated running all lucid practice during my personal sleep time only. Without the influence of sleep-freeze drug cocktail, the lucidity was more intense and easier to manipulate than while plugged in for Ray. However, I needed to rehearse lucidity while under the intoxicating influence of the sleep drugs to prove this whole thing really worked. So I learned to distort my dreams for Ray, purposefully muddling the content to prevent detection. It was like splicing multiple film strips. With the right software, one could extract my true intent, but no brain possessed such decryption algorithms, and so the message was lost upon transfer. Karl never taught me these lessons, but I was learning lucidity dream by dream and developing the skill to mix illusion with reality. I learned by practicing on Jane. Despite sharing the full truth, Jane's insistence did not subside. In fact, being part of the plan pushed her to want more. Honesty with Jane was its own form of a slippery slope. Her persuasion could seem impertinent if not for the lavish flirtation. Seated on my couch, her hand firmly holding my left leg, I could not escape her teasing or her interrogation. "John, for the last month, you have used my knowledge of your mission as an excuse to avoid me." With each emphasis, she squeezed my leg, driving me crazy. "I did not push you for the truth, only to have you cut me out of your life. That's not how you treat a confidant or a girlfriend." Her brown eyes, burning with fire, controlled my attention. "I want to be involved. I want to help you and see you through this errand. You trusted me once. Now trust me again. What can I do to see you through this mission? If you are practicing sleep, then practice on me." She released my leg and motioned to herself. "Let me share the burden of ending the world with you." She laughed at the seriousness of our cause, but she had such power to persuade me. It was this power that led her into the laboratory, into my secret, and even into my life. The simple power of her gaze and beauty, the look of one set apart from the world, untainted by sleep ports and stolen dreams. With a casual caress and assertive plea, I would surrender to her demand. Surrender meant a win for Jane. She didn't need to know that I had planned such action regardless of her pestering. I paused to collect my thoughts before responding. I put my hand on hers, reassuring. "Oh, I know how to treat a girlfriend." That calmed her enough for me to explain. "I'm rehearsing lucidity while sleeping for Ray and for myself. But I have to be cautious when I dream for Ray, careful not to reveal my hand. I'm not ready to enact any plan yet. My skills aren't yet complete." Before I could finish my sentence, she interrupted enthusiastically, clapping her hands in delight. "I could be your client. You can practice on me. Oh, please," she begged teasingly. Being a schoolteacher must have taught her every way to manipulate someone into getting what you wanted. As I was saying, my skills aren't there yet, and without a client's feedback, I can never be certain how my dreams are perceived, but you can be my client, and I will be your sleeper. I smiled, and she returned the gesture, confident in her feminine wiles and the future. Her brain immediately snapped, understanding the impact of this volunteer work. "But you're too busy already, John. There is no time to sleep for Ray, sleep for me, work for Ray, and sleep for yourself. A third round of sleep will consume any time that's left for us." Her voice maintained its girlish humor, but her eyes were somber. I felt increased confidence in Jane's involvement. We had to make this work or risk blowing the plan. "You're probably right," I replied, formulating a plan as I spoke. I'm always right, she interrupted. You need to stop forgetting that. She elbowed me as a reminder. Right, but we could stick to a single REM cycle, the minimum time needed for sleep capture. Such a sleep takes 1, maybe 2 hours for me and about 5 minutes for you. It will be difficult but possible. Perfecting the plan and examining the weaknesses are worth the added sacrifice. Jane was biting her lip, eyes rolling upward in thought. She continued slowly, ponderously, and without flirtation. If you can sleep for me in an abbreviated cycle, why not sleep for yourself? Is that even possible? You won't waste the 1 to 2 hours on me, and you will see what your dreams are like on the other side. You will be both sleeper and client. Wow, that would be a real complex paradox, she mused. The ideal was brilliant but futile. I responded reluctantly, not wanting to deflate the genius with a casual reply. You are one smart woman, Jane, she nodded in agreement. But I've already tried it. The approach sounds reasonable, but it doesn't allow us to test the hypothesis. I must know how someone receives my lucid dreams, fragmented or complete, not how I receive them. When a sleeper sleeps for himself, he receives playback of his own signal. The sleeper's brain possesses a near-perfect decoder. There is no mistranslation from different upbringing, language, gender, or experience. The tape is played in the original studio, and if dreamed lucidly, the message is sharp and clear. I was so proud of her, and honestly also myself, for trying this trick. I've actually slept for myself in the last month and experienced the same lucid dream, clear and vivid, twice, once as a sleeper and once as a client. As the sleeper, I lived the experience with free will. As the client, I lived it as a puppet-controlled observer, lucid control stolen from my mind. I need to dream for you for this to work. You must be my eyes in the land of borrowed sleep and second-hand life. Then how do we start? She asked, nodding her head in understanding of the sleeper dilemma. Hold it there, Speedy. We need to establish a baseline first. You've never had a sleeper before, so everything is going to be new and probably disturbing. I grimaced in mock horror. It may be worse than regular borrowed sleep because you and I are suboptimally sleep matched. I resent that, she smirked. I laughed. Regardless, you have to learn what to expect from a normal sleeper before I transmit lucidly. Once you have grown accustomed to typical transference, we can rehearse lucidity and perfect hybridization. We can start tomorrow with a simple transfer. Come sleepy. Contemplation powered Jane as she worked out her next question. But I thought now that you dream lucidly, that's the only way you can dream. How do you not take control and change everything, being always awake? Gods do not relinquish power easily. Great question. I felt like the master instructing his brightest pupil. This is how Lucius felt peering through his wizard eyes. I may have been naive, but he could see the potential back then. Falling asleep is like entering a warm shower on an early morning. Your hand reaches in to check the temperature. Transmitters signal acceptable risk. You enter the shower, and water immerses your naked, vulnerable body. Jane's eyes widened. You've got my attention. Rivulets of water run down your head, and you close your eyes. Placing my hand over her eyes, I closed the curtains to her soul, allowing her to better imagine the shower. Then, in a tone of mock seduction, copying her own flirtatious style, I explained, You desperately hold on to the last moments of sleep, as if your rest can continue submerged and vertical. The water is warm and soothing, enveloping you in the blanket of rest. Whether consciously or not, at this moment each morning you stand at life's crossroad, precariously positioned between rest and duty, choosing to stand still and silent, blind a little longer, rejecting the motions of bathing, is not really a choice. It is so natural, so easy, that such a decision happens often without thought, and suddenly minutes have passed away without movement. You may have started to bathe and found you cannot remember if you shampooed your hair or just entered the shower. With her eyes still closed, she leaned in and kissed me, breaking all train of thought. I enjoyed the moment for a time before shaking my head and gently pushing her away. So that's what you think about in the shower. Go on, she insisted, while lifting her eyebrows and licking her lips. Okay, hold that thought for later. Alternatively, sometimes you enter the shower, shake off sleep's temptation, and complete the bathing motions you are trained to do with little exertion. You will finish your shower and commence your day. I live this battle every time I sleep for Ray. Entering dreamland for me is like entering the shower. There is the natural peace, the warm embrace of running water. This is the physical reaction to dream space, your body's recognition of the subconscious playground, an opportunity to wipe the daily slate. Your mind knows how to do its job. It knows that you are asleep and that it can now rest in the absurd hyperfunctionality of dreaming. This is the easy path. It is also the safeguard that will ultimately allow for mass dissemination of my drug. Cumulus cannot automatically activate lucidity in all users. Control must take time and require some personal effort. Like overcoming the desire to sleep and finish your shower, the user must decide to wake up. The power is then in their hands, but only if they want it. With a bit of exertion, more a trained habit, like tying one's shoes, you can now commandeer that dream space and paint your own picture. You can become a god in your own world. You can conquer sleep, finish the shower, and tackle the day. I can now choose whether to dream lucidly or dream haphazardly. The problem is mixing the two. There is one other problem illustrated by the shower. There are times where you complete your shower automatically, times where you exercise control without knowing it, stepping out of the shower clean and clueless. So too happens with this drug. I call these excursions daydreams, and these are the most dangerous to the plan. These invite unplanned lucid dreams. They reveal every deep secret. They have the elements of subconscious mental planning, but the clarity of lucid thought. These are like doping on truth serum. Of these, we must be most vigilant. I opened my hands to finish, shrugging off the challenges so obviously before us. She laughed quietly with a huff, her face revealing the cracked smile of a co-conspirator. Shaking her head gently, she added, "You tell analogies just like your father. Incredible." "How would you know?" I asked, startled. "You've only met him once." Her immediate look signaled surprise, but then Jane replied calmly and confidently, "You've told me many times about your father's stories. It is one of his idiosyncrasies you like least. Seems metaphors and similes may have their place." I hated when she was so right. So many memories of my father centered on his stories and the misery behind those metaphors. I was not my father. The system broke my father. The system was not going to break me. Our conversation over, Jane helped me locate veins for her maiden sleep transfer, she having no permanent ports. In preparation for tomorrow, I inserted her first client port. Not a cry or scream left her lips. We next sized the visor, preparing her to say goodnight to sleep virginity. "How can they do it day after day?" asked Jane as she removed the sleep visor. She looked perfect, lying in my bed in her banana yellow silk pajamas. Jane had ignored my argument that pajamas were not needed for 5 minutes of sleep, and she changed into the ridiculous clothes to prove her commitment and enthusiasm. She sat up and handed me the visor. I just managed to grab her hand and stop the first-time client's natural reaction to yank out the tube. "How do they descend into another person's hell? The garbled dreams are dreadful. They have no meaning. They have no substance. They are empty shadows. We need to move to lucidity, and fast." It was Jane's first client encounter with non-lucid sleep transference. Baseline testing might prove fatal. Not all sleeps will be so disorienting. Disorienting? That was awful. I feel less rested. I could discern nothing. No impression, no memory, neither pleasant nor horrific. It was the worst of all. Cold emptiness and ambiguity. This was not dreaming. I reassured her. Your brain makes minor adjustments over recurring sleep patterns. Right now, you are adjusting to new brainwave material. This was just your first time. If every session was that terrible, few would be so eager for a sleeper. But it changes with time, and you grow familiar with your sleeper. All the more reason to lock onto a sleeper for a very long time. She did not look convinced. Not every night is the same, and Ray still has moments as you described, but his brain has built increased patterns of recognition, or at least coping mechanisms. Actually, the bulk of these patterns develop rather quickly. Your mind is a motivated playground. So how long are you going to make me endure these nightmares? About a month, I admitted while clenching my teeth, or until you experience 2/3 dream acceptance. What's dream acceptance? I forgot I was dealing with a sleep novice, and not a sleep-free scientist. Dream acceptance is a subjective test, but basically it means you receive dream content and construct your own response, albeit a hybrid hazy bastard. The puckered frown on Jane's face told me she was not following this explanation. You'll know when you're accepting dreams. Just know for now that what you experienced today was a failed test, in the other 1/3 bucket. The principles of dream acceptance and the abhorrence Jane experienced percolated in her thoughtful mind. What about all those people who can't afford a single sleeper and consistently pick up freelancers at the sleep bank? Do they live this nightmare forever? No, I laughed. I may have despised the sleep-free product and its outcome, but the genius of the system, and some sheer luck, always impressed me at the scientific level. If you borrow enough sleep from random sleepers, research shows that your mind develops a similar but more flexible coping mechanism. Your dreams will always be severely hazy and distorted, but you won't have the rejection phenomena of a new sleeper. Ray's grandfather did not plan on any of these consequences. He only created and unleashed the Leviathan on society, crushing all innocence, frying our brains one sleep at a time. Jane looked honestly terrified and patted her crown. I like my brain how it is. She paused with concern and shook her head. I don't want to get used to this. Come here, Jane. I reached for her and held her tight. I was a disparately non-comforting person, but here was the product of sleep on a society. It irreverently destroyed the guilty and the innocent. Sleep-free crushed all resistors, those that ran away and those who fought back, as if standing tall could save you from the tsunami of destruction. You can still back out if you want. This is just day one. There's another way to help. We will have many dreams before we're done, and viewing lucidity may be worse. She pushed away from me, demonstrating her strength, so that she could see my eyes. I'm in this to the end. I will not reject any way out you offer me. Let's resume tomorrow, though. I need a little rest. My own rest.